In this video, we're going to discuss how to monitor lock weights. In your daily Postgres job, you may see some scenarios where the application is complaining about lock weights. In those cases, you want to monitor when the lock weights are happening and what is causing it. So here, we're going to discuss two approaches. The first is using pg-stat-activity queries, and the other is using Postgres log. Remember, with this method, you can only capture the information live when it's happening. Using the recording in Postgres log, you can go back into history and see when the lock weight happened. This is the main difference to keep in mind. Now let's go ahead and trigger a lock weight scenario. For that, we've generated a fresh log using the rotation. Before doing anything there, I just want to show you that this is the latest log and that there is nothing in this log. Here you can see, even if I do a tail, I don't see anything there. One thing you need to know is you need to have this enabled to capture the information about log lock weights. If you want to record information in the Postgres logs about the lock weights, you need this to be on. If it is off, you won't get that information in Postgres logs. Make sure that you have this turned on so that all the lock weights will be captured in the Postgres log. Now let's go ahead and trigger the lock weight. What we're going to do is there's a table called towns, which is 12 gigabytes in size. When I do alter table to change the data type and the column ID from begin to end, it's going to acquire a lock on the table. And when you run a select at the same time, obviously it's going to go into lock weight. So let's try and see what happens. So we've started the alter table now, and it's being executed as you can see. In another session, what we're going to do is I'm going to do a select star from towns limit 5. Here we can see this is not returning any results because it's waiting for the log. How do we know that? Well, there are a couple ways, like I said. First thing is we will see using pg-stat-activity queries. For that, we're going to use some queries like this, which are documented in our source material. This is one useful query that we got from this reference, and it's really helpful to see the lock weight information. We're going to go to Postgres and run this command. So here we can see that there are these two things. Select star from towns, and as you can see in the weighting column, it is true. For the alter table, it is false. So that means the select table is waiting and the alter table is not. The select table is currently waiting for the alter table to finish running. Now that we've confirmed this, the other thing you need to take a note of is the PID of the alter table. The PID of the select is this one. Try to remember the PIDs because we are going to refer to that later. There is another useful query that we've documented here. We can use this to get some information about the blog queries. Here you can see, as we run this command, that this is the output we got. We can see that this PID is currently being blocked by this PID, and the blocked query is select. Here we can see all the information needed and what is currently blocking the query here. These are some of the queries that use pg-stat-activity to get this kind of information. As you can see, it's very helpful. Because locked weights are a common problem, and you need to find the cause and the victim, and these queries will be very helpful to troubleshoot. The only gotcha with these queries is that they're live. You do not get the history. So let's say you want to know about a lock wait that happened yesterday. You may not be able to get that kind of information using pg-stat-activity, unless you have some kind of snapshots going on at regular intervals. In those cases, it's better to use the Postgres log method to see the locking information. Let's see if it's still being logged. So here we're going to run the command again, and we can see it's still in lock wait, because that table is large as you can see, and it's going to take some time for the alter to complete. And until the alter is done, the select has to wait. So that is our problem right now. We don't want to run alters without analyzing in production. So there's some settings like statement timeout and log timeouts and other session settings that you need to use to avoid any locking scenarios in production. Be careful about running the alter tables in production. This is one scenario, as you can see. One alter table is blocking all the selects. Let's give it some time to complete, and once it's complete, we can check the log. You can check the log now, but it's better to check once everything is done. Let's take a look and see what is returning in the log. Here we can see something has already been written. Let's take a look. So we see there's some information about checkpoints, but we are concerned about logs. So here you can see this is the one we are worried about. As you can see, that process, 28136, is still waiting for access share lock. We also have additional information. We can see here that the process holding the lock is this one. This is the kind of information you get in Postgres log. As we discussed, the importance of Postgres log is that you can go back into the history and see the things that happened previously and the day before to see what caused the lock waits. Let's give it some time to finish this alter table, and we can check other entries in the log. As you can see, the select is successful now that the alter is done. Once the alter is complete, it releases the lock, and you can also see the select is successful after the lock is released. Also, we can run that query that we used before to see if there are any lock waits. Now we can see that there are 0 records, meaning there are no more lock waits. One other thing I wanted to show you is the entry in the Postgres log. Remember, it started with an entry like this, saying that the process is waiting for lock, and then this process is holding the lock, which is the alter table. So once the alter table is done, the lock is released, and it's going to write some more information, such as this here, which is really useful. It says this one acquired the lock which it needs, on which relation, and on which database ID, and after how many milliseconds. This is very, very useful if you want to know how many seconds the lock wait happened. This is the kind of information we can retrieve from the Postgres log, even in the history. So this is very, very useful to know how much time and what the duration of the lock wait was. So this is an interesting job scenario we covered today, but there are a lot of other job scenarios covered in CloudDB school curriculum. Please enroll if you haven't enrolled already.